Adeline. No. Good morning, everyone. Adeline, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay. How are you today?
I'm great. Good to see you all.
You too. Gary's excused today, so we're gonna start the meeting, and it is recording, right? Yes, because he'll wanna take a look. Kim distributed a memo that I wrote, and you all should have it in front of you. Adeline, did you get a copy of that?
Possibly. I haven't been in my town email this weekend, so
Okay.
I'm not
Well,
sure.
it came via email, but I'll read it to you just to give you a little bit of background. The Development Office continues to encounter challenges with the code as it relates to definitions, lack of, and ambiguities associated with private drives versus driveways. When a lot fronts on a private driveway, where do we measure lot frontage? If we use the current definition, it would be on a public right of way or street, and many parcels would then become flag lots or landlocked. Excuse me. Our current minimum lot width definition is based on width at street line, and street, as it currently reads, does not include a definition of private drive or allow frontage on private drives or driveways, yet these continue to be proposed. Chris and I have looked at all relevant definitions and want to clean up the code, both ending landlocked parcels, AKA anything that fronts on a private right of way. Additionally, myriad private drives exist with no provisions for maintenance and upkeep. So basically, our proposal is the attached with the changes and additions, revisions to the code are in red. And I don't know if you all want me to read through it.
I did see this, Shauna,
Okay.
so I'm familiar with this.
And
And
obviously, yeah, it's up on the screen if you can.
Yeah. I had already seen this, and I read through all your red lines. I personally had no issues with it.
So let me jump in here for a quick second, just give you guys some context and stuff. So basically, the gist of the definitions with the changes is the way that Shauna and Chris have provided those. Those would allow for subdivisions along private rights of way. Okay. I think the town board has got to make a decision at some point whether or not they want to allow subdivision along private rights of way. I think that that question is still to be answered. I think that one of the things to keep in mind that we've run into is, and I'm going to use the villas as a perfect example. The villas is a housing development where the lots were subdivided along a privately owned roadway, privately owned drive, public, privately owned right of way, whatever you want to call it. So as issues arise and new residents move in, they call and they complain, and we're like, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do about it. It's a private right of way. Problems with the road, problems with the drainage. And they're like, well, we pay our taxes. We pay just as much taxes, which they have a point. They pay, you know, the assessments are $300,000+ on those. But there's nothing we can do because the design was a private roadway, private right of way. Chris Nadler and I have gone back and forth as a result of your planning board meeting last week. And we think that there's a little bit more that at least we should have some conversations relative before any decisions are made with this. Perhaps while the definitions there and what they're trying to spell out here, the definitions may need some tweaking. Perhaps what we want to consider is no major subdivision along private rights of way. So in essentially meaning if you have a lot down along a private right of way that you want to do 1 or 2 lots, fine. But once you get to 3 or 4 and you have a major subdivision, that becomes more problematic. We have that experience with Hillcrest Drive, right? You've got a whole housing development along a private drive that creates any number of issues that we constantly battle. Again, maybe if it's a major subdivision, it has to be a dedicated road to the town of Canandaigua and built to town standards as opposed to these private
Do
subdivisions.
we
So
define a major subdivision?
the town code does define a major as 4 lots or
More
more.
and more.
Is there a way that we can define better what these existing issues already are and going forward without encouraging private drives?
Well, so that's the exact conversation, right? Because the way this is written that Shauna has proposed to you would allow the continued subdivision off of private drives.
When do the examples you're using
Mhm.
have homeowners associations?
Yes, well, yes, both of those do. No, Hillcrest doesn't.
Mm-mm.
Villas does, Hillcrest
His-
doesn't.
Right, and Annalinda doesn't, and that's another example.
That's another example.
Mhm.
There's plenty of
There's
examples.
a ton of examples.
Of those that don't have homeowners
Right.
associations. So is the issue that these private drives don't have homeowners associations and a prescription as to how the roads are going to be maintained?
In my opinion, the issue is the developer got away with something, got off cheap and not having to build the road to town specs.
Mhm.
Well, that's a different conversation, Doug. I mean, we can get into that because I think there's probably some pros and cons.
Can I
But-
interrupt? I'm sorry, John and Tom, could you move the speaker that's on the table in front of you to in between the two of you? I'm sorry.
But
Thank you.
when they use a private drive for a subdivision, I think there ought to be a prescribed maintenance responsibility for the roads. No different than the yards or, the public. Well, it wouldn't be the public, it'd be the private lands in that subdivision.
And how are we going to enforce that?
Are you enforcing it now? We're not, right?
Right, that's the
Right.
problem.
Right, so, but if there's a homeowners association and it's prescribed as to what is to be done, then the homeowners have a recourse. Where now you're saying they don't because there is no homeowners association and you can't tell these people to go to that homeowners association and take your beef to them, right?
Okay, but let's use the example of the villas. There's an HOA. The plan was built, the plan was signed,
Right.
saying that it was going to be a privately maintained road.
Right, so now their recourse, if they so choose, would be legal.
Okay, to some extent, but we can't enforce that. That's
Right.
between them, right? But
That's
yet,
between them.
who are they
There's-
gonna call though? They still call us.
They
and
still
say-
call
Well,
Right.
Right.
And
Well, they
there's-
can make a call and you can refer them to the
Tell them to call
homeowners
their
association.
homeowner's president.
And
We
then,
do.
Another problem, what about roads like Beacon Hill in my neighborhood? That's a private drive. And it's, why would I have to pay for their maintenance when they have, it's just one street in our neighborhood that has a private drive. So,
well, that sounds like it's an anomaly, but what we're talking about here is whether we're gonna allow developers to create private drives to subdivide greater than 4 lots. That's the issue. That's what I'm hearing.
That's, I think,
That's
there's 2 issues. I think the definitions, as Sean has proposed them, right? Relative to all of this, relative to private rights of way and drives and all that stuff, that's an issue. Then this major subdivision is another issue,
So
but
there's-
it's related.
yeah, it's related because I think the definitions have to follow.
Yes,
The intent.
yes.
Right.
If we could back up a little. I thought when I read the agenda that this was coming up because of your recent dilemma with Annalinda, with Rocco's proposal and what's a shared, what to me is a shared driveway, and we use driveway, road, right of way interchangeably. And I went to our zoning regulations, talks about shared driveways. That's what we're really talking about, aren't we? And our cross access driveways.
Well,
What was
You
the
asked the
issue?
question,
What
is
was
that
the
what
issue
we're
up
talking
there?
about?
Yeah,
but I don't think so, because if it's a driveway, that's almost kind of one situation, but if it's a roadway, that's kind of a completely
If we
different
talk about a
situation.
roadway, I think that means it's the town's problem. When it's a
It
shared
wouldn't be.
driveway or a right of way, it's the abutting property owners concern. And we have regulations about shared driveways or cross access driveways in place. Should be sufficient width, minimum of 20 feet to accommodate two-way travel. Do we have two-way travel on a lot of these shared driveways? We don't.
You could.
We could, but we don't.
Well, how about the villas?
I
Is
guess-
that a single width road or is it a
No.
double width?
No, that's double.
That's double width. But I thought our dilemmas arose because of places like Linda.
Sounds like the situation's a little more substantial than that.
Correct.
Right, absolutely more substantial.
Yes.
But that is an example. You've got two things happening there. You got private driveway and a private drive on Alinda, and then off of that, a
That,
private.
to me,
driveway
that's a shared
two-
driveway.
Up at the top.
The whole damn thing is a shared driveway. The minute it leaves County Road 16, it's a shared driveway.
But Tom, I think that still definitions are important, right, with that stuff. So like the definition relative to subdivision or the section of code, chapter 174, it talks about subdivision. You can subdivide along private rights of way.
So let me ask a question. Should we talk about definitions first or should we talk about the concept first?
Well, I think it may be helpful to, if we could talk generally larger for a second, because then we can help you guys with suggested definitions to
Right.
get to whatever intent it
That's
is.
kind of what I'm thinking as
Yeah.
well. And I still want to go back to the conversation of if there's a private driveway or road, whatever, with either one, and I buy into this community,
Mhm.
and I know there's a homeowners association that's responsible for taking care of the road. If I have a beef with the road, I take it up with the homeowners association.
Absolutely.
No different than a condominium, right? If I got beef with the condominium, I take it up with the homeowners association. And if the homeowners association isn't fulfilling their obligation, then I have legal recourse against that entity.
But again, that works when there's equitable, in villas, something like that, where everybody's on a private road. If we're gonna leave it like that, you can't use something like we have, again, on Beacon Hill in my neighborhood, for example, because you've got 90% of the neighborhood is not on a private drive, and there's one or two little private drives with 6 or 7 houses on them. And then why, that's a significant, I pay $300 a year for my homeowners association dues. And if I had to pay for the plowing on Beacon Hill Drive, that would go up, I would think, significantly. So
Well, Adeline, there's nothing we can do about existing non-conforming conditions or existing.
exactly, yeah.
But what we're talking about here is how we're going to address the future.
Right. Well, and to add lines.
I mean the same thing.
Should Beacon Hill have been built to town standards and dedicated to the town and become part of the roadway, the network, right?
Precisely.
So there's
Well,
New
that's a
York
whole
State law.
different conversation, Doug.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's still major
No.
subdivision. She just said there's 6 or
Yeah, but
7.
so we have the issue of whether private driveways
Mhm,
are going to be maintained by the private entity,
mhm.
that community. And then you have the issue of whether I'm a developer and I develop that roadway and I make a deal with the town to dedicate the road to the town.
Right. So let's break it. So the town code defines major subdivision as 4 lots or more, I believe, right?
Yes.
So let's talk about for a second. So let's just hypothetically set that to the side for a second. And let's talk about less than 4 lots. I'm a developer and I own a piece of property and I want to build 3 houses and I want to put a private drive in. And I'm going to say, I'm going to create an HOA and I want to subdivide off of that. And I'm only going to have 3 houses and they're going to have septic systems. It's a rural area, whatever. Does anybody care?
No.
So that may be an easy way to say that, and then we have a whole separate conversation about the major subdivision.
And that's the way it is now, isn't it? Is it, your scenario is the way it is now.
For the 3 lots or
Yeah,
less,
yeah.
yes, you could do that currently. Now, Chris Nadler and I had quite a conversation on Wednesday as a result of your application Tuesday night, whether or not that's a flag lot. There's a whole nother section. Actually, I'm gonna do an interpretation on that, just so everybody knows, so the zoning board can weigh in on that. But 3 lots
great.
or less, 3 lots or less, right? So you're saying they could be on private drives, and yes, there's a ton of examples all over the town of developments that have occurred over the years on private drives. But as long as there's that threshold, right? Because once it also is 4 lots or more, then it has to have sanitary sewer and everything else. So if you're talking about a rural area, 3 lots or less along private drives with septic system, it's tend to be a rural area. Nobody really cares, right? I mean, then they can do essentially what the current code allows. We'll have still some cleanup work to do on the definitions.
Do they still have to have a homeowners association?
No, not unless the planning board requires it.
The only thing I would require would be some sort of cross access easement
Mhm.
to be created, because I think you've got to have some sort of structure for the maintenance of that driveway.
Mhm.
And as far as parking, because you get into range wars with neighbors about, you didn't contribute to fixing my driveway, or you had a party and you blocked the driveway and I
Right.
didn't get home.
Right.
I mean, there's got to be some sort of structure, and that could be in the form of an easement, an access easement or something like that.
Right.
It's recorded and
Right.
sort of sets the guidelines as to
Right.
what can occur when.
And we
And
do
there's a
have-
definition of maintenance in that?
Yes,
Okay.
there should be.
There is,
They're not in current
Not
ones, they're
now.
not. I mean, a lot of them are,
Yeah.
we come in, we ask, do you have a maintenance easement?
right,
Like Sarah Linda was in.
right.
you know,
Sure, for her new
And if
driveway.
she
said,
said
do you
no-
have an easement for sharing that driveway? And she's, something back in the 40s, we sort of shook hands and.
So if they said no on a new development where they're gonna build 3 lots,
Right.
what would you say?
We would say you've got to provide an easement to the satisfaction of our town attorney that would allow for the access and maintenance of that shared drive.
Is that written as code?
No.
Should it be?
Well, the planning board has broad
We have the
discretion
Right,
Right,
that they
but,
could require it.
well, and if the planning board decided they didn't want it, we'd still have an issue with it, right? We potentially could have an issue 10 years from now.
Correct.
So I still table the question, should there be a requirement for that situation?
It's a fair question.
What happens?
I agree with you. We need
something.
to legislate responsibility in their deed to the abutting owners.
I
That
agree with
that
that.
it doesn't become a town responsibility. And we got to
Because
differentiate.
those 3 people could be friends today and tomorrow they could be
Oh,
hated enemies.
absolutely. They're warring over who's got how much frontage and who's going to pay for plowing. It always happens. But
Well, the other problem becomes something like Acorn Hill Drive, which I believe started as a private drive and turned into a major road connecting into a huge neighborhood and was poorly built from the beginning, which is causing any number of problems today because it started as a private drive.
Yeah, but Adeline, that's the situation where we have more than 4 lots. And that's this follow-up conversation to this one. We're focusing now on less than 4 lots? Or is it
Yes.
4
Or
or
less
less?
than,
Less.
so it's 3 or less.
3 or,
Three or
it's 3 or
3 or
less.
less.
And I believe we ought to have a code that says there should be an agreement
Among the shared.
among the people that share the driveway or share the roadway, whatever we want to call it.
So if the code allowed for subdivision for 3 lots or less along a private drive or private right of way, we'll get in the definitions of that, as provided that the maintenance agreement is in place.
okay.
I think so.
And
We
recorded.
already have this in code under 220-75B, which talks about shared driveways, and we've got to differentiate between what we call a private driveway and a shared driveway. But under shared driveways, cross-access driveway, interconnected parking, private streets, and so on, shall be constructed to provide access to lots internal to the subdivision, shall be recorded as an easement and shall constitute a covenant running with the land. Operating and maintenance agreements for these facilities should be recorded in the deed. So there'll be a responsibility for the abutting.
What's the description verse?
It's
So we're not
22075 is
reinventing the
access
wheel
control.
here.
But Tom,
Access
it still
control?
needs to be defined as 3 lots or less, or minor subdivisions.
Well, we got to differentiate between what's a shared driveway
But we'll
and
get to that,
what's a
right?
private
Yeah,
driveway.
We'll get to the
Right.
definition. But the concept, it sounds like there is.
Yeah, there's
Somebody's
code.
thought about this.
Yes.
Yeah. Because the town doesn't want to take over
Right.
the war between neighbors over a shared access, whether we call it a driveway or roadway.
Sunset
Or-
Ridge has 2 that are proposed right now.
Up top
Mhm.
and down below.
Yep, they have a private drive, they're calling it, with 3
Call it a
lots,
Driveway. for me. Yeah,
driveway
private driveway.
on the east side and the west side.
Yep.
Same, yep, off of a public road.
Yeah, and then so the
Yeah.
definition of shared driveway is a driveway connecting 2 or more contiguous lots to the public street system. So basically, and again, we just have to work into the definitions, but if you were going to subdivide 2 or 3 lots, because that's basically what we're talking about,
Mhm.
you can have that subdivision along a private shared driveway or private right of way, provided it meets all these other things. So
You start out with 3, but you end up with 6 or 8.
Well, then
That's
you're-
the other dilemma.
Then you're in a private road.
then it's, but
That
then,
makes it
but
easier.
then,
You don't want it to become
That's-
a private road, then
but-
it's the town's responsibility.
but that's
not
where,
right.
It's a
Once we-
non-dedicated road.
once we get into the conversation on major subdivision, right, if we're ready, that's fine. So then that's where I think the code needs to say, if Mr. Developer, you're gonna convert this to a major subdivision, meaning there's 4 lots or more, then you are responsible to bring that
Up to
entire
standard.
roads up to town standards for dedication.
How do we do, Island is the classic problem.
Mm.
How do you legislate solving that issue?
We can't go back and fix that, but
Are
I mean,
we-
for future,
Are we comfortable with 3 lots or less?
I
it
think
sounds like
so.
it, based on this
Yeah.
conversation. We'll see what the board
Two-
says.
Has that ever been done,
2 would
though,
be
what you
preferable,
just
but-
read? Has that ever
I
been?
got no freaking idea. I
You
dragged
just
it up.
found it.
I dragged it up because of today's meeting.
Yeah.
You know, what the hell is a shared driveway or what's a
How'd you
shared
find that, by
roadway?
the way? Did you just go into the
I
code
went
and
to
you
town
just
code and
searched a word or
souped
something?
around, yeah.
Tom, we've applied that. in
Sure.
Ac-
board meetings.
it
Yeah,
calls
says
X-
application.
Access control, whoever dreamed it up or whatever.
So it has been done and people have been
It has been done.
told
There's
they
other
had to record
examples.
it in the
Yep.
deed.
Do
and-
you have it? Yeah, well, either
Well,
you,
that's
do you
good.
have one or you have to get one before we'll sign the plans.
Okay.
Back to 3 lots or less, are we concerned about length of the shared driveway? I mean, what if a lot's, 3 acres long or something like that? You know what I mean? Like, is that a
Don't
concern?
care.
It's up to the.
Don't
So
care.
it's a private entity,
As
right?
long as we pawned it off
I
to
mean,
the
the other thing,
abutting owners and
You
it's
get
in
into
their
the
deed
standard, what's the-
about
what's the
sharing
look like?
Right,
responsibility.
and then you got the safety
But that's
standards
a
at that
driveway's a
point.
driveway,
that get
Whether it's
kicked
one
in.
house or 3 houses.
Right.
I'm just throwing that out there to think about.
Let's think
But they
about it
still,
all.
they still
More to
have to
maintain.
comply with any code with respect to lot
Our
size, and
standards.
the zoning
Chris,
district, all the.
regarding driveways. But when you get into a private road, now we're talking a specific standard that we
Yes.
have in our standards,
Right,
a non-dedicated private road. And this is the thing I laid on Greg was you're gonna have to bring this thing, that's on Linda up to standards as a private road.
So now,
Who, me?
with regard to,
What's the width of that right of way? Do we have
4
any
lots
idea?
or
There's
more.
no right of way because it's a private road, but the road itself is 14 feet wide.
So it's non-complying. It's supposed to be at least 20 feet wide. But how do you correct that?
Well, you guys are talking about something
That's- you're
different. You
talking
guys are talking about a
driveway.
pre-existing non-conforming,
yeah.
because
but
that
also-
Analinda
went to the
predated
thing.
our town code that requires that, right? So that's Analinda's a pre-existing non-conforming. John's trying to ask about
Now
a
you got-
future 4 lot or more
you
subdivision.
get 4 lots or more.
Mhm.
Brand new.
Brand new.
subdivision. Okay.
In my mind, there's only two ways that the roadway can be constructed. One would be that it is a private, whatever you want to call it, driveway or road, it's private. And in my mind, if it's private, there ought to be a homeowners association, which spells out how that driveway or road is going to be maintained. The other situation is if the developer wants to build a roadway that is within the town specifications and wants to dedicate that roadway to the town when the roadway is constructed or finished.
So here's my question about the private, right? So we have examples all over the town of Canandaigua, especially where development, let's face it, the available land left tends to be uphill of Westlake Road, right? And so with a view, right? So then, as you get into these developments, you may have a landowner who has nothing to do with the housing development that makes all kinds of claims that the private road that has been installed is negatively impacting them from stormwater, from traffic, from any number of things. And we consistently deal with that. So why is there interest, I guess, or I'm gonna try to figure out how to say this, in allowing a developer to construct a road that doesn't meet town standards?
Because I think you've got two different markets in my mind. You've got a market that is all private and is built on the concept of being completely private. And you have the one that is town maintained.
But there, I mean, in terms of the real
Is a
estate,
road.
Town maintained would be a
A
road,
road.
would be, yes, the developer would have to
definition.
build a road that
To
conforms to
specs.
the town standards.
Yeah.
but the real estate market, there's no real difference between
Sure there
the
is.
value. Look at the
Sure
price
there
of the villas.
I mean, if I'm gonna buy a piece of property
Mhm.
and I'm looking, I have to weigh whether I'm gonna buy on a private development with a homeowners association,
Mhm.
or I want to buy one that is maintained by the town. That's a pretty big factor, I think, in considering
Well, for-
what to buy or not to buy.
Okay, for you,
You don't
I
even know.
understand that, but look at Hillcrest. Is there a real difference between the actual homes that have sold there, the value of those versus others on Westlake Road? No,
Is Hillcrest private?
yes,
Very.
So I'm not talking about the value, I'm talking about the buy, the sell. The developer has to sell the
sure,
concept of this being a private
right.
development
Mhm.
with private maintenance
Right,
versus a developer saying, you're buying on a town road with all town maintenance being provided by the town.
right.
But John, on resale, for example, if you guys wouldn't mind, pull up Quincy Circle and Beacon Hill Road. They're an excellent example. On resale, people have no idea what, if the house is even in an HOA, much less if it's on a private road, what that means. They don't even know or have any indication that a private road means I don't get snow plowing, school buses won't go down my street's going to possibly deteriorate quicker than the streets
Well,
around it.
Buyer beware.
Adeline, when you go to buy a piece of property, that
You're a lawyer.
agreement has to be in the documents that you're looking at to buy the property.
Absolutely.
But-
So
but-
you or your lawyer should know whether that property has private maintenance or public maintenance.
One would think so.
I can share with you, I understand absolutely you, I 100% agree with everything you're saying, John. The buyer should beware, but Hillcrest, I can tell you example after example with that particular road. You have multi-million-dollar homes where there's issues because it's a private road that we constantly have to get drug into, whether it's drainage. We had a fire truck got stuck up there the other day or back during remember it slid off. It was responding, it slid off. We had to go up there and pull it out because again, nothing was built to standards. It's not the right slope. It's not the right this, it's not the right that. Do you want to continue to allow that type of development? I would challenge you on that. I don't think you want to allow that type of development where they're just putting something in that doesn't meet to our town specifications. It would be much simpler for the future resident of the town of Canandaigua if it was built to the site design standards and then it was accepted. I get it's more cost for the developer, and so that means the cost of the house is going to be more. But you're gonna, I mean, we've spent, Terry, how much money have we spent looking at engineering for Hillcrest Drive, for God's sakes? I don't even know.
Yeah,
There,
been many
it
years.
goes up over and over and over. again.
Well, then I would ask
Okay,
the
why
question.
have we done that?
Because the residents
The
continuously,
Well, wait a minute. I don't have sympathy for the residents if they bought on a private road, private driveway, a shared whatever access. And these are not dumb people. If they've got that kind of dough and they've got lawyers that should be equally smart, sue your lawyer. Don't.
First of
tell
all,
the
money
town.
and intelligence aren't
Okay.
equal at all. You should know that.
I
The other
should know
thing
that.
is that it's not just the people up there, it's people down below
With the drainage
that
issues.
are on a road, you know, that have these problems, and those are the calls. When you get the calls in the future, send them to him, because Tom says he'll just hang up. on them.
there's any number of issues, especially in that particular case, but there's other examples too
So
around.
let's
it.
just
We
stay
had
focused
a
on that one for a
problem with
second.
St. James Parkway,
Mhm,
that Morales did not build that to town standards.
mhm.
They wanted to, you know, develop that whole area up on the hill, Harvest View, all that stuff. But we stood our ground and said, no, you gotta fix the road. They finally fixed the road. So I think you're gonna do something like that, you're gonna build a development, you build it town standards or you don't build it.
Agreed.
Period.
Agreed.
Over X number of lots or
I
no,
don't
no
care.
matter what.
Because as you said earlier, that 3 or 4 becomes 6 or 8.
Oh, yeah, they
Yeah,
further
so-
subdivide.
Yeah, so I'd say, no, you gotta do it. You
So
gotta
then
do
what
that,
would we do if
it.
he had 4, let's say, and it was going to expand to 6 or 8? You'd make him take out the existing road and put in a road that
Well,
conforms to
so
town standards?
3, say
Right.
3, because
Three.
4
I'm
would
sorry,
be
3,
major.
but I misspoke.
It's a lot cheaper to do it up front, you know that. I mean, that's to rip it all out and do it again. I mean, you're paying more than twice, so.
Well, I want to stay, I don't want to jump to conclusion yet. and I don't know whether I agree or disagree yet. I want to explore all of the concepts first. I heard that there was a concern also about drainage.
Mm.
Isn't that a responsibility of the planning board to address those issues and make sure that the abutting properties that are not part of the subdivision aren't impacted by the subdivision,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So that shouldn't be a conversation. I mean, as
But
part
it
of
it
this, I
does
mean,
factor into it though. It's,
I mean, it
there's the black and white and what should or shouldn't, and we say all the time,
After
the
fact, it's
subdivision,
easy
right?
to say.
Right? But then there's the calls that come in after that.
Anytime you stick a shovel in the ground, you change water courses, you change,
Well,
you know,
yes,
you do your
absolutely.
best engineering wise,
Right.
but stuff
Sure.
happens.
Or,
stuff happens.
and I go back to Hillcrest again. I mean, during some of those heavy storms that we've actually had to put in the summertime, we've had to put plows on 1 tons to scrape the debris off of County Road 16 at the bottom of Hillcrest, because, you know, it's all of those types of things. Should it be factored in the engineering up front? Absolutely, John. It should have never, ever happened, but
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like, you know, if you got grade issues there and there's a problem with access by emergency equipment, that should have been considered up front.
absolutely.
Well, you
And
do
that's
your best up
that's
front,
another
but
pre-existing.
you don't know.
non-conforming, right? So-
I mean, things happen.
Yeah, you do
Changes
your
occur.
best and you hire MRB or whoever to look at the developer's plans, but.
And don't you find that in the more recent history that with stormwater management basins and all, there's not a lot of problems like.
It's better. Yeah,
It's
it's better.
better, yeah.
It's for sure better.
I think the new technology has, you know,
Right.
accounted for that. But you have a lot of developments that were built back in the
Right.
80s and
Well, and a lot of what we're dealing with are developments that were either started or changed or modified from 10, 20 years ago. There's very few brand new housing developments that come along that are just going through the approval process now.
So could a Hillcrest be built today, in theory?
It could be built, yes, 1 acre
Only some
lots. It would, the road configuration would have to be, I think, a little different, but yes.
In what way would it be different?
Well, just in making sure it hits all the proper slopes. So it would have to have the switchback and everything that it has and everything. It'd probably have to be laid out different. And then the road would have
But what
to be
you're saying
wider
is
and
that-
all the infrastructure to support it would have to be different.
You know where you're gonna find out is when RSM builds.
I was
which
just
is
thinking
sort of
that.
a
It's a similar.
analogy to Hillcrest in terms of
Yeah.
hills, switchback roads, and, you know, making sure,
But the challenge is it's already approved, right?
It's approved.
Right?
yeah.
So it's
So you gotta
Approved
make sure
with
it's built.
Non-standard road? A non,
It was approved
A
for
road with-
whatever at the time, but those are our town dedicated roads.
That's, yeah,
okay,
they're town roads, unlike Hillcrest.
Yeah.
But in terms of.
Right.
Slopes and
that
configuration,
angle,
all that,
yeah.
yeah,
Same.
coming off the hillside,
Mhm.
that's similar.
Yeah, so pretend for a second, okay, let me just throw it out there. We all know that Notre Dame Retreat House is for sale. It's 100 acres, right? Or maybe it's not for sale, but there's at least a question about it, right? 100 acres off of Foster Road. Do you want to allow a developer to come in and build 60 homes on that on private roads? Upwind or uphill from the people that already live along County Road 16 and stuff? Because that's essentially what you're saying that they could do.
well, the road itself should have no impact on whether it impacts the people down lower,
Okay,
at a lower elevation,
in the truest sense, I would agree.
Presuming it's engineered.
presuming it's
correctly.
engineered properly, right?
Okay. So
So that's
what about the 60 new residents that are going to live there?
in theory.
Right,
I mean, we're talking hypothetically here,
Right.
so. If the developer didn't want to build a road to town standards, he'd have to build, and this gets to the conversation we were just having a few moments ago. He'd have to build a non-complying road, right? A road that's not built to town standards. And he'd have to have a homeowners association, in my mind, he or she, which would specify how that road is going to be maintained.
From
And
my perspective, I don't ever want to see a private drive allowed over 3 houses. It's only going to cause future problems with the town. I can't see that ever being a positive.
how does that become a problem with the town?
Because, I mean, well,
And again, I haven't taken a position on this yet. I'm just kind of brainstorming and just throwing out different ideas for conversation.
I mean, I see nothing but problems coming up from, I mean, you're correct. Lawyers, when houses are sold, should be informing their clients of what's going on, but that's not always what happens. And I see only problems coming up from the private drives from all sorts of different perspectives, be it accessibility with the emergency vehicles, be it.
That should not be an issue, Adeline, conceptually,
It wouldn't be if you build it to town standards.
right? But
I'm
conceptually,
saying it should be
when
a
the
two-town
plan
standard.
goes to the planning board, one of the considerations should be access with emergency vehicles.
it seems like from my experience, more often than not, the developer doesn't want to put in the other stuff. They don't want to put in sidewalks.
The
They don't
gutters
want
and
to
the
put in the
sidewalks.
gutters. They don't want to
Expensive.
do all that stuff,
Yeah.
right? That's what's making it essentially not get to town standards. Maybe they cheat a little bit on the width. But the question is, okay, so 60 new homes, do we as a town want to require that it has all those amenities, that it has the sidewalks, that it has the gutters, that it has all that stuff? Do we just want to say, okay, if you want to build it, fine, but here's everything you have to do?
Well, you have been doing that with all the new complete streets is,
Yeah, I think
There's a
those are things
push.
that we've done
Mhm.
and been dedicated streets, but the hybrid is the stormwater management system is HOA maintained.
Mhm.
right.
So you're getting into, okay, you've got public streets, but a privately maintained stormwater system,
Right.
which the town doesn't want to take.
Right,
So maybe that is our model for the future in terms of, you know, all the access points be, all access ways be public.
Public.
And if we want to stay with this concept of having the stormwater management systems maintained by the HOA, go with that one. I mean, you're right. I mean, in my former job, you have a private street, eventually the residents are gonna say, hey, you know, I pay taxes. I want the town to take it over. And the only way you could even think about it would be bring it up to standards and we'll consider it. And of course, homeowners would say, we
No,
can't
it's-
afford
They
that.
can't.
Right.
I mean, I look at all Poplar Beach, all these lanes we have around.
Mhm.
You get any calls about those in terms of?
Some,
you know,
but those
got
are all
potholes?
so predated. I mean, those are all.
Yeah, they are, but I mean-
Pre-existing non-conforming. I don't know how we ever make the pre-existing non-conforming ones all come up.
We can, but we can keep them from happening in the future.
Right.
We can afford it.
Right, exactly. To Adeline's point, it's the
Talking
future
about
ones.
the future.
Yeah.
Well, anytime we get a site plan down there, or rarely a subdivision, we again ask them to show us a copy of the access easement, this is shared driveway, and they usually do, I guess, if there is one.
If there is one, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Right, because there's a lot of them that there aren't any. It's all handshake stuff, or
Right.
something was recorded on a survey from the sixties and then they're trying to use that, right? And that type of stuff.
So if it's not an issue, maybe it's something we don't have to worry about.
And if we decide we want to move in this direction, then why wouldn't any, or maybe that's what we're talking about, any new subdivision, 4 houses or greater, would have to have sidewalks and have to have storm or gutters. And it increases the cost of development in Canandaigua.
Well, I believe that our complete streets policy that is in effect, even though it's not in the town code, already requires that.
So we're doing it now anyways,
Essentially, but we're doing it at the
Well, we're doing
discretion
it-
of the planning board.
at public roadways and not at private roadways.
Correct.
So every public roadway does that now.
Yeah, and the new
Regardless.
housing developments have to have sidewalks and all that stuff.
You get the pushback that it's more impervious, you know, you're creating more impervious with the sidewalks. So I have a sidewalk on both sides of the street. And I think for the most part, we've sort of gone one side.
You
Try to
generally
pick
have
the
gone
side
one.
that's got the trails and all.
Mhm. Like Pierce Brook has one.
So we, you know, we,
I'll give you an example. The villas, I had a trainer, a facility, her name is Trish Burke from the New York State Department of State, was here, and I was taking her around a little bit. This was last summer, it must have been 2 years ago, right before COVID, whatever that was, 3 years ago, and drove her around through some of our housing developments. And we went into the villas, and the very first thing out of her mouth is, I can't believe you would approve a housing development without sidewalks, as 3 sets of couples are walking along the
Yeah.
road. You know, and that's the
that
whole,
density, you know.
that's the whole issue, right? Relative to that. But if it was a
Well,
public street that was town standards and all of that stuff was built and constructed and dedicated, then the town, yes, has the responsibility
Well,
for it.
I'm certainly sensitive to that, given my situation.
Yeah.
But bottom line is, we're increasing the cost of construction in Canandaigua by, if we do this.
But there's other ways to
And
mitigate the cost of
that's not a bad
construction.
thing. I mean,
Right,
it just,
right. A little extra density all helps offset that, right? I mean, there's other ways there's other mitigations for that.
Right.
So.
right.
Are they putting in the private drives to increase the density? I mean, is that the main problem? It's reducing density because we're requiring cul-de-sacs with circles, or what's the primary issue that's encouraging these private drives like Fieldstone Trail or Beacon Hill? Or
Yeah, they're trying to get
Cost.
more lots, I think.
Yeah.
It's
Cost.
an easy way to get Sunset Ridge.
Keep
Well, keeps the
expenses
costs
down,
Yeah.
Control access.
because I
You
don't
can
have
say
to
no
put in
thoroughfare.
gutters and I don't have to put in sidewalks. And I don't have to make it 20 feet wide. Right? That's bottom line. That's what it
Yeah,
is.
you're 14 feet instead of 20. Subdivision streets 22, except when you get a offset for the fire hydrants.
And there's certainly benefits in terms of the complete streets if we do decide to move in this direction. I mean, it just makes for more friendly neighborhoods.
Well,
Absolutely.
we have embraced complete streets. We have to.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the
It's
policy
a
is
state,
adopted.
I don't think that's.
yeah.
It's a policy. It's not in the code, but it is adopted,
Should it be in the code?
probably.
Oh, absolutely.
I thought it was mandated
Especially
by
relative
the
to
state.
subdivision.
You're in essence putting it into the code if we decide we're gonna make all the roads up to town standards
Yeah.
anyway. Huh?
That's why the
Go big or go
discussion,
home,
right? and then
Bigger.
we can-
Yeah, you know, I'm not,
It solves a lot of problems and it really sets it up for the future that the people living there are going to have access to much more than they would have had. So,
yeah, I'm not opposed to it. I'm just want to make sure that we have a thorough discussion about it and make sure that this is the direction we want to head before we all vote on it and say yay.
Well, we're gonna have to bring back some draft language for all of this, including these definitions and everything, because it's gonna be a little different than what's in there.
On one side, you've got apartments, which would have private driveways. The other extreme, you have single family homes on a public street. And then you, as you move toward the center, you've got condos. They're on a, sorry, they should, we're saying now they should be on a public street. Okay, even though it's an HOA, has a condo association.
Right.
That should be a public street. And then as you,
Or it could be a private street built to town standards.
okay.
Well,
Why would they do
What's the
that?
point?
I don't know why they would do it, but I'm just saying it.
They're gonna-
Pawn it off.
Potentially it could be, right?
Yeah.
They're off the books.
if they want to call it private, maintain it.
God bless them.
but really, when you're talking about the density of, like, I mean, think of Uptown. I can't for the life of me imagine why we'd want any of those streets to be private, because there's gonna be such density, right?
Oh, yeah.
We need the public
Good
maintenance,
example.
right?
Yeah, it's
Anytime you
more-
have that density, you need. Now, Creekview, so that's an interesting hybrid, right? Creekview, the 4 phases. So there is a public street, the loop is a public dedicated, and we've accepted dedication of that, that then has the private roads off of it. So the apartments themselves are actually on private
Mhm.
roads,
Is that the one off County Road 28?
10.
10
Okay.
behind.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The DeMarco
The DeMarco property, yeah, yeah.
But again, that's not bad. That works. I mean, those are private driveways once they're off the,
Once they're off the loop, right? And the whole purpose of, I know Adeline said the bus earlier, the whole purpose of doing the loop was so that the school bus would come in and pick up the kids.
Well, and that brings us back down to Shauna's original point of we need to define more clearly what these things are. And that's the whole purpose of the ordinance meeting today, was
what
just
the
defining.
different thresholds are in terms of number of units, driveways, access. And we have to hold tight on road frontage rules, so we don't get a bunch of flag lots or further subdivision, which is when it arises.
But it certainly simplifies the definitions because you're either gonna have a road or a driveway.
Yep,
Absolutely.
either
Yes.
driveway, a shared driveway or a road.
Yeah.
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 So you wouldn't have a private drive.
Well, we're proposing 2 private drives.
Well,
Up to 3 lots.
that to be over 4. And in this definition, a private drive is over 4 units. A private driveway, which we're saying is a shared driveway, would be.
So Doug, a question
Driveway
just
would be,
popped
yeah,
in my
3
head.
lots.
From a maintenance perspective, and I've heard you say, make comment on this before. We want to maintain the roads. We want to bear that cost as a town, as opposed to having a private entity maintain the roads for that 60 lot development.
So, I mean, that's ultimately a decision that the town board's gonna have to make, right? But the
From a
cost,
financial aspect,
but from the financial aspect, we can maintain the roads a lot more efficiently than what a private entity could. Okay, so if the future resident of the town of Canandaigua was having to share in the cost of the maintenance of that road, whether it's plowing or repaving, they're gonna pay substantially more than what we pay as a town,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So there's the.
but I've
from
heard
a
you
cost
say that
efficiency.
the taxes don't pay for the maintenance on the new developments.
They don't. The residential development traditionally, now, you can make arguments once you get into something like Uptown where you have greater density, that actually, that there's a net positive because that's almost a quasi
Right.
commercial. But a single family home residential subdivision, right? There's actually a cost to the taxpayers of the town of Canada that we're bringing that on. It's not, I mean, it's dollar for dollar. I think the last I knew it was like $1.14 or something or other for each dollar that comes on.
Is the town's gas tax allocation based on the number of miles of road?
The
It's
CHIPS
15.
funding is, the CHIPS, the
CHIPS,
consolidated
yeah.
highway and
Based
the
on the
miles.
mileage.
So the more
So for
miles
every
we have,
more-
we actually get more
Get
money.
more money from the state.
Not a lot, but yeah, but it is.
But if you have an
The-
undedicated street,
Right.
you're not getting anything. for that.
Right, the roadway miles actually does come into play in a couple of the different formulas for funding.
Wasn't there, it used to be there was a number, I remember years ago, the average selling price of a house, if it was above that number, the town was making money, but below that number was costing the town, for maintenance services.
Yeah.
I don't know, this was 15, 20 years ago, it was like a $250,000. The average selling price was above that, your
Make
revenue, tax revenue was greater than, the expenditure, so I don't know if
It's-
that rules like.
I
that
think
hold.
for us, it's a little different though, because it's total services, right? And so that also includes parks, right? It includes the transfer station. So there's a cost go with the transfer station, right? That's because we don't charge extra for that. And there's so many other factors that also play into that.
And your tax base isn't strong on real estate tax either, so. If it's a high rent with high taxes, then you'd be getting more money to the town if your real estate millages. They're like Pennsylvania
Yeah,
taxes.
the mortgage tax, we generally get between like $250,000 and $300,000 a year in mortgage tax, generally speaking. So,
Total.
mhm.
That seems really-
So I have a question.
Average.
What if something is not a residential development and it has a private drive? Like, I think of like if Everwild had actually happened, for example, that would have been a heck of a long, quote unquote, private drive that might have eventually had other homes coming off of it for all we know. What do we do in a commercial instance where it's a long driveway like that? Is that required to be up to town code or what?
Great question, Adley.
Yeah,
I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
single. and
Well,
I wonder
if they
look at-
expected us to take care of it, it would have to be built to our standards, so.
So the thing that would kick in, like, so the Everwild example, that's the zoning there is SCR1. And that could have come in as a simple special use permit application. So it would come before the planning board and ultimately the planning board would have to make that decision under the special use permit, whatever conditions associated with that. So it's not really commercial, quote unquote, per se. I don't know that there's anything in our, I can't think of anything in the code that says if it's commercial, it has to be on such and
The tech
such.
park, that's a public street, right?
Campus Drive, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think they would have to be
Businesses.
because of,
Yeah. I mean, that's
The
not
vehicle
commercial, but
traffic.
it's non-residential.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking I could see there being some potential demand going forward in that direction. And while we're addressing this, we should think about that as well.
I think if it's single ownership, I don't think it'd be an issue. You build your driveway, you maintain your driveway. Now, if you start having other businesses coming off of that, then we're getting into, modification, what we're talking about with the residential.
Well, that is the nice part about the planning board having the discretion, especially under special use permit, that you guys could make that case on whatever it is. But to your point earlier, John, say the planning board changes over and there's 5 new people, that's the risk you run too, right? So, But the
But you've
town board
got
appoints them,
code
so-
to guide. You've got code to guide them.
Right.
Do we allow the utilities to be under the road? Or do they have to be next to the road?
Well, a lot of times they have to cross to get, I'm not sure I understand.
So when
The
somebody,
main
the main line's running
Yeah,
next to
they're-
the road,
Okay.
yeah.
next to the road,
I mean, it's probably have an Acorn Hill, there hundreds of.
Right, yeah, yeah.
And that's why
We don't normally.
rebuilding that road is extremely expensive. All utilities have to be moved.
Right.
So then we
That's
have 20 feet for the roadway. Plus the gutters?
It should be, well,
It's
so
more
most of
than
them should be
that.
26, right? Because
Yeah.
it's 2 13-foot travel lanes plus the shoulders.
Yeah.
Do you have it in front
And
of
then
you?
Yeah, I was
For
looking at minor
hydrants.
subdivision.
Pops out.
Yeah, majors,
Majors,
13-foot lanes.
yeah,
2 of them.
Plus the
Right.
plus
plus the gutters.
Yes.
Yeah.
plus the
Wide.
sidewalk.
Yes. Yeah, so
Can
you're
utilities run
60.
under the sidewalks?
Yes, but it's
They
not,
can.
I think what we've usually said is no, that
They
Jim
They
would
don't usually.
move
So
it
you
to
gotta
the
put the
side.
sidewalks in plus the utility, plus a space for the utility.
Right.
So by the time.
But that could go in the right of way. 66 usually. is
66.
Mhm.
White Cliff's a good example, John.
Right away. Yeah,
I'm sorry, Adeline, I did not hear you.
Oh, White
I
Cliff.
should say White Cliff is a good example. Where I live.
So you gotta have 66 feet
yeah, usually on a major, yeah, usually 66.
and sidewalks on both sides?
Well, so usually the
Can.
planning board will allow them to just put it on one side. There's nothing in our code that says it has to be both sides. Complete Streets says both sides plus bike lanes. So if there's like federal money involved,
Yeah.
like for instance, we're redoing the reconstruction of Canada Farmington Town Line Road right now, right? That sidewalks both sides plus bike lanes plus. So
Which gets more than 66 feet.
yes. Yeah. And then there's, when you start talking about traffic calming, you really start to talk about cheating the lanes down to 11 feet, but that's kind of separate.
Traffic calming is
It's,
kind of a myth.
yes,
It lasts for a few weeks, a few months. People get used to. Like
Oh,
down
you mean
on
they start
County
speeding up
Road,
again?
32, where Hickox Road crosses, you see those white stripes. If people see those and they slow down, they center the car for a while. And then speeds pick up again. It doesn't last. The people using the road know the road. They gradually, they just it goes away. It's the same thing on
You
Middle
wouldn't know
Cheshire
about
Road
flag
when that was
lots,
rebuilt.
your opinion on flag lots?
well,
Or are we done this for now? or-
yeah, let's you and me work together on
Mhm.
some different stuff relative to all this, and we
Yep.
can bring something back.
Yeah, I think it's.
Yeah, we'll
road
bring
shared
something more
driveway.
global
They're
back.
the 2 options.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we're, again, I encourage you to look at this 22075.
Yep.
Yeah. I put it on.
Got it.
And because we use the term private street, I don't know what the hell a private street is. In addition to the term shared driveway and cross-access driveway, we got to clean up definitions. And then we have to understand them and why.
I think when some of these things are written, people just dropped in whatever.
Well, it sounded good at the time, yeah.
Yeah.
In looking at this, the first thing under lot frontage, that first sentence is confusing to me.
Which part's confusing?
The first sentence,
The front of a lot shall be construed to be the portion nearest the street.
and then you keep reading for the purpose of determining yard requirements on corner lots, all sides of the adjacent streets. So if
Mhm.
it just faces that area and doesn't run adjacent to it, it's still considered the front. So I'd ask you to draw me a sketch of that. Because I have a hard time understanding it.
Do we even need lot frontage?
I'd ask for sketches too. yeah.
Right.
So the code actually, and Shauna's got that in the note up above. The code doesn't actually reference lot frontage.
Never.
The code actually talks about minimum lot width.
Right. There's no lot frontage that I've found. yet.
I wonder if we could even just strike
probably
it, but
could,
anyway,
maybe.
so minimum lot
a good-
width.
But I think it goes to the point where you got to look at the verbiage and kind of clean it all up.
But there is
Oh,
a
yeah.
definition on minimum lot width.
I have a hard time even understanding what construed means.
Yeah. Right, and so that's where it becomes important to do that, which feeds into the whole flag lot question.
Yeah, because it's gotta be at the street line.
That's a whole nother
Well,
conversation.
right, and we keep coming back to street.
Right.
Mhm,
Which
street
ties
line.
into this conversation.
Which, yes,
Absolutely.
and then the definition of street.
So
Oh,
what
they're
is a
all
street?
connected, yes.
That driveway or shared driveway
Right,
frontage.
so
Right.
do we add, right, so there's nothing in street other than, well,
Well, there's a thing in there, right, about the right of way. The street, I think
the street
references.
line and, yeah, they, right, well, different collector,
Right,
yeah,
but no, it says
What do you mean?
entire right of way, right?
yes.
So
but
then
which
you
isn't
have to,
defined.
right, so then you have to look up right of way. So you're chasing it.
It's
It's not.
not
that's so-
intuitive. at
That was
all.
my Wednesday morning with
Chasing
Chris
it.
Nadler. We were chasing the code
That's a
back
good
and
way to
forth
put it.
from one section to the next,
That's it.
which goes back into the whole thing on flag lots and everything else. So
Right,
Sean has determined it. So there was an application before the planning board last week.
I brought it
That-
if you want to pull it out.
Sure, why
So
not?
what's our current policy? on flag lots? We do not
Well,
allow any.
Shauna, what did you?
it's, if you could pull up,
I heard
you have
the
access to
ZBA
the
said
M
we don't
drive,
allow flag lots.
Yes.
I- I-
22015.
The
So-
ZBA hearing.
It's
for
under
that
projects.
Same property out on.
And
Is the
M.
DeMarco property?
Yes,
So essentially, to answer your question, yes, there's a section of the code that does not allow flag lots because it talks about the depth, the
3
the
times the width.
frontage. It's
Yeah.
right, the frontage can't
Excuse
be
I'm
less
sorry, what
than
was it?
It's
3 times the depth.
depth,
Before you go
22,015.
back, right? So that essentially
That would
prohibits.
include, yeah.
So the
Flag
issue
lots.
with the DeMarco property that was a flag lot wasn't the issue that it was
There
a
it
flag
is.
lot. It was the issue of
There's a new site
access to the
plan.
lot because there was already 3
Yeah. And it
driveways
still is. But
and,
now
If
it's
you
a
go down,
Yeah.
you can,
and they were talking about, I can't remember exactly the
Exit.
details,
Yeah.
but creating another access way back up in
Which do
there
you want?
and or sharing the
For the back
access
lot.
should be
for
that.
the back lot.
That one,
That's
yeah.
what the board
That's what they
had.
want to do for subdivision now. They want to
So-
There it
subdivide
is.
off the lot and have it access that private.
So she's gonna pull it up here. So actually, I'm gonna walk up here. Sorry, I'm not gonna be able to see this. but
Yeah,
I'm
I was say, if you can share it, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
just gonna share it here. So this, just scroll. all
There
the
you
way.
go.
Keep going, keep going, keep
There it
going.
is.
So you see how this creates a flag lot here, and this is a private drive along the red line here. So that's a private drive. So this is where Chris Nadler and I were going back and forth, and Chris Nadler and I actually came to the same exact conclusion. That while the subdivision along a private right of way, per the current town code is permissible, the flag lot is not. So they would need a variance for the flag lot or change the lot line so
Cut
it
it
comes off here
Yeah.
and this is on there, and then they wouldn't even need the variance. Now, that may not be what we want to do in the future, but that's what the current code allows.
Yep.
Is he 66 feet wide with that access?
No, it's 60 foot. There's 3
foot.
20
You're
foot right
saying
of
that
ways.
this lot should have access off of this.
For this traveled lane
That's
here,
what the
right?
applicant's
That's what the
proposing.
current town code would allow a subdivision off a private lane.
So you're saying get rid of that,
If
Cross it
this
off.
was part of that,
Yeah.
you wouldn't even need a
To the
variance.
pole.
so the pole's gone, but according to our code, you cannot have frontage along a private right of way. It has to be a street.
Current code
Right.
does allow private right of way. It actually says right of way, actually, when you go right to it. And that's the example that we're talking about. That's why I wanted to have this conversation, because I think that, I don't believe that's the intent of what you guys are trying to allow. But Nadler and
I
I
get
both
it.
looked that up, and the current code does allow a subdivision along a private right of way. But it does not allow for flag lots.
Where's the subdivision off the private right of way right there?
So what they would be doing is that lot that you're looking at.
Yeah.
Pretend for a second that where it says lot 2 or lot 1, I'm sorry, at the bottom, and it has that little strip of red line next to it. Pretend that little strip, that narrow strip doesn't exist.
You got,
Right.
you've lost me completely.
All
So
right,
it goes
sorry,
away.
yeah,
The flag goes away.
see this little strip that comes up here?
Yes,
Okay,
That's
pretend
gone.
that's not there. Pretend this is just a lot number 2,
yes.
okay? And then pretend that 18 acres up there is lot number 1. That is being subdivided and the road frontage is on the private right of way. Now, I don't think for a second that that's the intent of what the town board,
No,
truthfully, in
no
my
way.
opinion, what the town board wants to happen, but I'm telling you, that's what the current town code will allow.
So you're landlocking
Yes.
that
Well, you're
parcel.
not though.
Well-
You're not because
Because it
it's a
has
private
access.
right away.
So if he's got a 60, let's call it 60-foot roadway there, entryway
does,
there,
yeah.
Right away.
right? And he's coming off a main
There's,
road,
there's
Why
60
do you
feet.
keep saying 60 feet? It's
There's,
just-
It's that 60-foot easement that,
that red line you just pointed to.
there's three
And between
20
those
foots.
two red lines,
Okay,
is it
there's
60 foot?
320 foots right here.
320 here makes
Yeah.
60.
Yeah, no, that's not what I'm asking.
You're talking about this.
Yes,
What about,
That can't be there.
that's gotta
that
go
can't be
away.
there.
This line
Why
goes
cannot,
through.
why can't that
Because
be there?
then that creates a flag lot, which is not permitted by the code unless they come get a variance.
So,
Because the distance back, the width here is only 30 feet, and then you're going back 489 feet. So that's more than 3 times the distance of the width. So that creates a need for a variance because that's a flag lot.
so let's go to what we're talking about doing now.
Okay,
And hypothetically,
so
if he made that 60-foot wide or 66-foot wide, and that we can discuss the technicality of that, but, and he built a road from the main road there back to that development per town standards, why would we have an issue with it?
we would.
There wouldn't be an issue.
Good.
Does he own?
But
the
it's
land?
only one lot, so that would be the 3 or
he
less.
could-
There's
and he could-
3, 4
Well, there-
subdivisions off of it, right?
I was just gonna say, if he wants to divide that 18 acres up into however many homes is allowed per code.
Right.
As long as he built that road per town standards.
Right.
I don't see why we'd have an issue with it.
I don't think we would.
Does he own the lot on the Dugway?
Yes, right now he
Yeah,
does.
yeah.
Oh, up here, yeah.
He owns lot 2.
Does he own that lot?
Yeah,
I can't see it there. That,
What makes the cheese more binding is there's 3 individual ownerships here, each 20
Yes.
foot wide.
Mhm.
He has access or owns a property above this
Yep.
lot,
Yes,
and it uses the middle access to get to it. So that's his right of access to the top.
Mhm.
This is owned by somebody else. This 20 foot, which is closest to his lot line.
Yep.
So we said, do you have the right to, first of all,
cross.
do you have the right to use this access
Mhm.
with this lot? And he says, I don't know, I'll have to look, my lawyer's looking it up. So that's one thing we put on it.
Right,
And the other thing is,
the other
if you
side,
don't, do you have the right to cross somebody else's property to get to your access that you have for the other lot? And he said,
So
let me,
if he doesn't own that, I would argue he doesn't have the lot frontage to do the subdivision at all.
I doubt if he has access to this easement for this lot. He might have it for the other lot. He doesn't have it for this lot.
so now let me ask you another hypothetical question.
Mhm.
Just focusing on that area in the red there.
Mhm.
If he proposed to put 3 lots on that back property
Okay.
and proposed a private driveway,
Uh-huh.
why would we have an issue with it?
If he was proposed, so, well, first of all, this lot could not exist by itself, right? Because it doesn't meet the current code, so it wouldn't be that. So you're talking about if an illegal subdivision was done and then he wants to build a house. and
He
develop it.
buys that property. All right,
So it's all one parcel though.
what is now?
All this is the proposed, but right now it's all one parcel with a total of 376 feet of road frontage.
Okay, so now if he wants to subdivide and put 2 additional lots in,
Okay,
Mhm.
why would we have an issue with it?
he's gonna create a
How's he gonna get
minor
there?
subdivision
He
up
put
there.
2 houses
So
in.
it would be probably a conservation subdivision that he would install a private driveway in, which when the planning board reviews it, because it's a conservation subdivision, he's gonna protect all the other natural resources. I don't think we care.
Okay, good.
But right now, he just wants that lot for hunting.
Because I
That's
wouldn't care
100.
either. I mean, if he wanted to put a driveway in there and put 2 houses in that back acreage,
Right. And he can
18
even
acres,
do septic systems with 2, right? No big deal.
no big deal.
Correct.
We're all on the same page then.
Yep. But if he wants to do 4, that triggers.
If he
major
wants to do
subdivision.
4, he's got to put a roadway in, and that's got to be at least call it 60 feet wide
Right,
and built to town standards.
right.
That's what we're saying. I mean, it's a great example.
Yep.
To talk about that.
But what he's,
And to Terry's point earlier, if he wants to build more than 2 homes back there, he's better off creating the situation where he can build the roadway per town standards up front rather than
Right.
doing it with 30-foot wide there and then having to come back later on and mess with the whole thing.
Right. Yep.
Right?
Right.
But right now, he just wants to sell the house to the tenant
Yep, the renter.
and have the hunting grounds up above. But
but he's.
then the access,
subdivision.
yeah, the
Yeah.
subdivision. And if that's the interpretation you have, I agree, I think, as long as he has legal rights to use that right away. That's sort of what we put on him.
We asked him to come back with that
But,
first.
but the subdivision says along a private right of way, meaning he needs the frontage. So if he doesn't own, if he owns the middle piece and not
He
the
owns
piece
the middle.
closest, he doesn't have the frontage to be able to do the subdivision at all.
Unless he has the agreement from,
No, the lot doesn't border, so it doesn't have the frontage.
But now you're confusing me.
that
He
is
would be
a
able
right
to,
of
and
way
he-
to another
Here,
parcel.
let me just draw it.
He would be able to, Doug, as long as he created that red access there, 60-foot wide.
If he was to create on his property and his parcel touch the frontage, he could do a subdivision. But what
That's
Chuck
right.
is saying is that he doesn't actually own the part that it touches.
Agreed. I understand it from that perspective, from that middle
Yes,
20-foot.
right.
But if he created in that red lines, in
Yes.
those red lines, if he made
Yes.
that 60-foot wide,
Yes,
he could subdivide up there. And built a road per town standards.
he could create a conservation subdivision, but that's not what he's looking
Coulda, woulda,
to do.
shoulda.
No, but he-
Let's
I'm
just
saying-
talk about the issue.
Yeah, to your point, if he wants to do a conservation subdivision and build take the 18 acres and create 2 9-acre lots or whatever, could he do that? Yes. He could do a conservation subdivision and do that, yes.
And if he wanted to increase the width to 60-foot wide,
Down here, you're talking
Yes,
about, on
and-
the road, so there's a private, essentially road that comes up to.
it's a
service
road
those
that's
2
going to be
homes.
built to town standards. And he wanted to subdivide,
Okay,
he could do that.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's not a problem. But he's not looking to do either one of those.
No way, he doesn't
No,
wanna
but this is
do
a good
that.
example to talk about,
Expensive and unlikely.
Right.
but this is the conversation that goes hand in hand with what we're talking about, or this example does.
Yes, yes,
So the key here would be for the owner to buy a 10-foot strip off of the southerly most of the 3
Yes. the
existing
20.
right of ways to buy access from whoever owns that southerly strip of right of way.
what's the minimum road frontage in,
225.
so he needs 225 feet of road. or
And
right
to
of way. Yeah.
the conversation was earlier. He doesn't want to, and that's what he's telling you.
Mhm.
But 2 years from now, or 10 years from now, he goes and sells it,
Right,
and he sells it in that configuration,
yes,
buyer beware.
yes. Correct,
Sure.
100%, yes.
Yep, he's cutting.
And then he'll
Anyway.
go to town and say, why the hell did you let him do
No,
it?
that's
Well, I have a question. Why wouldn't we require, your red flag that's coming down? Why wouldn't we require the driveway and such for lot 2 to come off of a private drive that's in where your red flag is right now? Like, why would we not, so that there could be a wider road frontage? If he owns lot 2 and lot 1 right now, why wouldn't we just require a wider flag and then lot 2's driveway access is off of that flag?
Well, we don't allow flag lots at all, so flag
Right,
lots are
that would-
prohibited, so, and the minimum lot width at the road
Road.
frontage, AKA right of way, when you define it in this area, is 225 feet. So while there's 346 there currently, or 376, he doesn't have enough to get two
Never number 2.
225s.
Yeah.
Some codes say that every lot must abut a public street. And in some cases, they have a width of that 50 feet, say. So you can create flag lots with a 50-foot
Sure.
pole
Right,
and a flag to get
Right.
access to the
Right.
back. But I guess
Yeah.
the fathers to be here have sort of felt they didn't want that, so.
well, I think it's the whole section about the flag lots, right, and the town board specifically, there's a section referencing the flag lots. That's why honestly, I wanted to do an interpretation so we can get something from the zoning board, because the zoning board is quasi judicial board. So they can put something on the record that'll be binding for us until such time as the town board has a chance to evaluate this and change the town code if need be.
Thanks.
You'll be seeing that in May.
We'll come to you. Well, actually, I think Nadler and I
Right.
will both end up presenting that one. So
That'll be great.
Doug versus Shauna. Let's see who wins.
We
So-
look forward to it.
We already have five variances on that night, so I'm gonna have to figure that out for May.
And this is one of them?
No,
Oh,
Should be six now.
no, Chip gave the go-ahead to add 5 to the agenda, because you have a limit of 4, so this will be 6. It'll be
This
a
one will
lot.
be the sixth?
Uh-huh,
Oh, gee. This one's gonna take
I don't
quite
know,
a
you
bit of
might have to talk to
conversation.
Chip
You may
about.
have to kick it.
In your
out.
sleeping bag and
Yeah.
So
pillow.
Chris,
Yeah,
have an
right.
opinion for us next week? or-
Well, so the interpretation is going to stay. So as soon as I file the interpretation, which I'm just not done, you're not allowed to.
So we'll have to, I
take
guess we
anything.
Oh, okay.
continue
So
the,
the
we just continue the
interpretation,
public
yeah,
hearing?
you'll have to.
See,
The
okay.
interpretation is actually a legal binding that will actually stay any execution. So.
You know, next to me on the south side of our property, there's 4 houses up on the hill behind me, and
yeah, we
over the
looked at
years,
yours the other
as
day.
they changed hands, there've been a lot of battles over who maintains the, because that thing is like 1,200 feet long, the driveway.
So long.
The plowing, the maintenance, the sealing, all that stuff involves. Over the years, they've had a lot of battles, and it's one of the lots up there is actually a land lot. She doesn't have a strip going out, you know, one of them's 40 feet wide and 2 of them are 15 feet wide. And one neighbor up there doesn't have anything.
Do they just cross over?
Now,
onto
she
the-
has
How does she?
an agreement that she can cross
Yeah,
over, it, but technically she's landlocked. She
Right.
doesn't have a, but the battles I've heard from them over the years, yeah, paying her fair share, you know, that's.
Right.
Yep. Boy, those. Yeah, and they wind up calling over here too. So, I mean, there's nothing you can do, but.
I don't know if we're gonna fix it, but
No.
hopefully we won't create any more.
Well, that's-
Situations.
yeah.
All right, well, it's 10:20-ish.
Good conversation.
Yeah, this was really,
Time flies. when you're
Great,
having
it
fun,
was.
you know.
I love this.
Well, and so I had a chance to speak with a couple of the town board members that I feel like today's conversation here was very similar to the conversation that I had with them. So that's good news
Okay.
because that gives us like something that we can bring back to you that I feel like we can advance to getting a positive outcome, getting this cleaned up, hopefully. So
Great. All right. You'll see another iteration.
So what's a quorum on this committee?
what's officially the committee? 5?
I want to say
5, I
5.
believe.
I
and
think
We've
it's
got
5.
4 active
So-
members.
3 would be a quorum. right?
3 is a quorum?
Didn't we have another guy?
Bob used to-
Bob resigned.
I
Bob
thought
is
Bob was
not-
on.
Ah.
So then it's 4. So then you have a 4, so 2. is
So you,
quorum
yeah,
I think,
2's a quorum?
for that.
I'm not a member.
If you're,
no. but
We don't
you
like
could
to keep-
Maybe assign another member.
Oh,
Yeah, we need one more person.
you actually, that's a good idea.
Well, Gary did.
Well, Gary,
every time.
yeah,
Well, Gary, yeah, but definitely.
that's
Four.
4.
We should have one more. That's
we
5.
had,
It helps to have more.
should we just touch on, we
Tax
had a
money.
conversation the other day about the ordinance committee and
Yeah.
there's a number of what I would call legislative, administrative related topics that we've got, that we really need to advance to the town board. That while they're local laws, they probably, honestly, I mean, the cemetery thing, for instance, that's a good example. There are so many land use relative things that we probably need your guys' attention more focused on, that maybe some of those administrative ones we need to just kick on over to the town board and let them handle those and have you guys focus on some of these types of things, these land use type things,
Maybe the
generally
ag
speaking.
committee makeup, can that go right to the town board? Maybe
Yeah,
here.
that's more administrative, right? But for instance, the ag committee has me working on a new simplified version of the strategic view shed overlay. So that will want you to come here, you know.
Well, one of the, had that training day we had a week and a half ago, you know, the guy that David Plant came in and talked about solar.
Solar,
You read through our solar codes
we,
and
solar needs some
listen to
work.
what he presented that day, and we're like this.
Well, we're wide open still,
But-
even though we have the ag exemption.
But there's so many, I brought this up the other day to Doug and to Jared, that it takes so long to get any one of these, you know, meeting once a month. You know, it'd be next month, now you come back with some revision to this.
It's too long.
It takes too long to get these things done. There are people out there that write codes for a living. We've had them do that for us before, I think in some instances. Town should spend the money to do that. To go to the people, the Bergmans or the whoever that are really good in that particular area.
Especially for solar, everybody's got the issue.
And they're all, yeah, and most of those wind up being the same. So
It's good to have
call it
uniformity.
boilerplate, but I mean, there is a lot of commonality, but there are other areas too. I don't know how many items there are on the list for this ordinance committee to look at right now, but
I wouldn't, to that point, I wouldn't be opposed to meeting every other week.
well, it's even that. I mean, it's, I don't know how many items are on this list, but I don't know how many get knocked off every year, 3 or 4 maybe. in a
Well, we
year.
took 4 months just talking about cemeteries.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, how do you get past
That's
that?
that
I
issue.
mean, it's just a.
That was killing me.
No, it just seems like some discussion ought to be held in that regard, that how do we speed this process up? Because as time rolls on and as applications come in for different things, we don't have something that's solid in our code, then, you know,
Well, this
construction gets going and then their grandfather, you know, I mean, it's just a kind of a,
here is an important topic.
you know,
And,
absolutely.
you know, if we got to spend 2 or 3 more meetings just talking about this and brainstorming about it,
Mhm.
I mean, we're out
Just-
till fall.
Right, right.
So, I mean, again, I'm not opposed to meeting every other week. I mean, try to push it along, and particularly now that the weather's good and we can, you know, it's.
We can meet outside, is that what you're saying?
We have- If you put that in the meeting minutes, Kim, I'm gonna be upset.
Stroll down the sidewalk for the ordinance committee.
Right?
Oh, that's good.
I think solar, and we've had at least 3 inquiries about large scale solar in the past month. It's something that is imminent.
Yeah, the planning board was looking at the zoning districts where solar were. applied.
Yes,
And then it just sort of exploded with Dave's presentation that, well, there's more to it than just that tweet of the ordinance.
mhm.
Oh, yeah.
The technology has changed so much.
That was eye-opening, that session really is.
Could you get language
Float barges
modified in
on
the next couple of weeks?
I have to head out, guys. Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Ellen.
By Adelaide.
I think
For
it's probably
this?
more robust than,
Are we talking
he's talking
solar?
about solar.
No, I'm talking
No,
about.
about this.
Oh,
this-
about this. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Should
we
we
can
meet
do
in 2
that.
weeks?
It's 2 weeks from today.
Yeah.
I'm not a committee member, so I can't, you know. Be Observer.
Yeah, but you're an important participant.
May 16th, that's the same day as the
Retired.
town board.
No,
Oh.
does it work?
It's
Is
the
that
same
okay
day as
for
the
you?
town board.
I know
though,
you're not on
but-
the committee, but you kind of are.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's
I'll,
fine.
I'll talk to Gary.
Who's PRC?
Oh, yeah. PRC.
Oh.
Oh,
Do we? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, we can't do that then.
The 17th, you have CIC.
Yep, CIC is in that.
Is,
is
uh,
in
How
that
about
group.
the third
18th.
Monday?
Is the
How
Wednesday.
about Wednesday after the,
Yeah, you have 5 Mondays in May, maybe you want to go the 23rd,
Do
That's
Wednesday.
good. I'm okay with that.
and then you wouldn't have to meet until, see each other till the 6th. June.
You're gonna talk to Gary and let us know, Sean?
Yes, I will.
23rd?
He's gonna want to know how today
Tentatively
went.
for the
anyways.
23rd.
Yes, tentatively May 23rd at 9.
On the 23rd at 10:30, I don't know if anybody's going to it. That's the ribbon cutting for Canandaigua Emergency Squad for their new.
Oh, their new building.
But, yes.
Great. Thank you all.